This week in Pure Reinvention.
And in the drafting class, the teacher looked out and saw there were 2 girls in the class. And he apologized to us for being in the class. And he told us that girls could not see in the 3rd dimension biologically and that we were going to fail.
Episode 101, Karen Slaughter-DuPerry.
Engage, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious people.
Welcome to this episode of Pure Reinvention, where we create space for the unexpected by inspiring a reinvention lifestyle. I'd like to welcome our co-host, Julie Novak, Chief Executive Officer of the Michigan State Medical Society. Julie, welcome, and thank you for doing this for us.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Wow, what an episode we had with Karen.
I really got a lot from her discussion and your interview with her. I think one of the things that stood out to me was the term collaborative listening. I think that there's some things there that we can all learn from.
Let's listen to this podcast, and then let's come back and talk about those things at the end.
Okay.
This week's episode is sponsored by MB Strategies. MB Strategies focuses on your success and provides you with sustainable results by identifying opportunities, guiding you through implementation, and navigating you to greater results. Contact MB Strategies today at mbstrategiesllc.com to start your reinvention journey.
Thank you, Karen, for being a return podcast guest for the Pure Reinvention Project. We were absolutely thrilled with your story about the Detroit Riverfront and your work with the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy. And we became very intrigued with what your educational background was and your executive background was, because obviously you have applied those traits to your work with the reinvention of the Detroit Riverfront. So, Karen, if I remember right, you had shared with us that you are an architect by training.
That's correct.
What does an architect really do?
Well, let me start with why I'm an architect, okay? Because in middle school, which was called junior high when I went to school, I was thrown into a drafting class. And in the drafting class, the teacher looked out and saw there were 2 girls in the class. And he apologized to us for being in the class. And he told us that girls could not see in the 3rd dimension biologically and that we were going to fail in this class because we were not made to be able to see things in the 3rd dimension. Of course, I went home crying and told my parents, and my parents instilled in me, as they always have, whatever you put your mind to, you can do. I took that drafting class and absolutely loved it, okay? That you come in and there's a clean sheet of paper and then there's a little bit of image and then a little bit more image, and then by the end of the day, you actually have something that you can communicate to someone. And so I went into Cass Tech and went to the architecture curriculum and then went up to University of Michigan and got a master's degree in architecture. But an architect is a collaborator. The only way that we can put a building together is to bring the structural engineer, the mechanical engineer, the landscape engineer, the interior designer, everybody in the room together in order to make that structure. Sometimes when I've had customers that say they want to build a home and they don't know what they want, and I tell them very, very candidly, I really don't need you to come up with a house plan. I don't. But if you want me to build your home, you have to tell me what you want. And then I can put that together and then you'll have a home. I don't need anyone to put together a house plan. Don't need them. But if I'm going to build your home, I need to hear what your thoughts are, your aspirations, what your desire is, how you want to live, and then I can build you a home.
So for an executive or those who are aspiring to understand the successful traits of an executive, what I'm hearing you say is if you can listen to what the marketplace, the business, the organization, the homeowner is desiring to have as an outcome, you can build it.
I can build it. And you have to listen and then feed back to the person. I thought I heard you say.
And now that's for verification?
Definitely, because what I may have thought was important, they don't think is the most important. So when I'm listening to you, I write them all down, and then I want you to prioritize those things. Because if you have a disparate number of things to do, they're not all hot. And you have to really prioritize what's hot and take care of those things first. And again, in architecture, we have schedules, and we also know benchmarks, and we know milestones, and we know critical path. And all those things help us to put the project together on time, under budget. And all that, again, you need to think of, how am I going to get from A to Z? What are the steps I need in between? What are the most critical? When do I have to do a check-in? And what are things that are dependent on other things? And I got to make sure those roadblocks are taken care of.
One of the things I'm hearing you say is that, and I think that executives get caught up in this, is they're trying to run the entity that they have, and they don't have the luxury of this blank sheet of paper to create this new entity. But I also think it's fair, and I'd like for you to talk a little bit about how in an executive who's running an entity, they need to spend some time with that blank piece of paper, because it's that blank piece of paper that begins to shape and form the remodel of the current entity.
You got to have a vision. What do you want to achieve? What's most important to you? And so when you're running an organization, as I ran the Conservancy, and collaboration was always important. Listening to everybody was very important, but also making sure that people had a work-life balance was very important, because at the Conservancy, there were 100,000 things to do. And at some point in your day, you have to say, I've done enough. It's time to go home, and I can pick this up again tomorrow.
Yeah, because it's never ending, right?
It's never ending. And there's always something else you could have done. There's always something else you could have improved. And so for me, I have a pad of paper right by my bed. And in the middle of the night, when that other idea comes up, I write it down, and then I can go right back to sleep, because I don't have to think about it in the morning and go, what was that idea that came up? Or who was that I said I probably should call to make sure that they're okay with this idea? But if you don't have a vision, if you don't start with a vision at first, you kind of can get off the path and do what everybody else draws you to do.
Right. So, Karen, how important is that collaborative listening to the marketplace, to the environment, right, to your customers, to creating that big picture vision? Because the big picture vision just doesn't happen. This doesn't happen with, and one person might be responsible, but they have collaborated and listened to all the inputs to create the vision. How important is listening to all those different people?
Most visions are solving a problem. How will you know what the problem is if you're not talking to people? How will you know what's out there that is needed if you're not talking to people, if you're not paying attention to what people are doing, if you're not observing what's happening? Then you won't solve anything. You're just doing something. Everything that we do should be solving a problem and making life better, easier, quicker, faster, cheaper, something. It needs to be solving something.
There's a really interesting thought process for all executives to think about, and that is, are you just doing something?
Or are you solving an issue?
Or are you solving an issue that's critically important to your constituency, your membership, your customer base?
Because there are a lot of needs out there, and you're placed here to do something, to be productive. And so what is it that you're going to be doing when your epitaph is read? What did you do in that dash? What did you do with your life? Where did you make the difference?
Talk about your ability, Karen, to be a really good implementer. How did that fit in your architect training and your background, your passion to implement?
Again, you always want to say that you've achieved something. And so as an architect, first I drew it. Then I might have done a rendering. And then I might have done a model, because, again, I am paying attention to my client, and not everyone can read a drawing. Not everybody can understand a rendering. Maybe you have to get it to a model, and then they can feel it, they can see it, they can touch it, and they can experience it. And now I've brought you along with me, okay? So we're not all created the same. We're not all at the same level. And as an architect and as an executive, I don't treat everybody the same. I have to understand what are the person's key points, what motivates that person, and then work with what motivates them.
There's been a lot of talk recently, Karen, about the value of storytelling in the role of an executive. And I heard you talk about the importance of illustration. Can you explain to our listeners the responsibility that an executive has to be that number one storyteller or being that number one illustrator of the vision to give people the confidence they need to go forward?
Okay, so there's a vision. And as the executive in charge, you should be the main cheerleader. The way I managed people when I had small staffs, large staffs, whatever, I always felt that I was there to motivate you to do your very best job. But I was the roadblock buster. Okay, so you get it to as far as you can get it. And then if there's an issue, I'm here to get in the room with you, figure out what the issue is. What do we have to do? What resources are you going to need? And then also, if I have to, get on the phone and get all those things for you to go ahead and be successful. I've also made sure that whenever my team was able to get something done, I made sure everyone got the credit that they were due. So it wasn't that I got it done, it's my team got it done, or in particular, Mike Bills got it done by name. And so my team always knew that as we got something together and we were out there working it, if they were successful, then they were the ones that got the credit for that success.
The successful executive today has a really good understanding of that word "we," don't they?
They better.
Yeah.
They better, or they won't be leading people very long.
Final question. How important is it for an executive to be adaptable in today's environment? Because it seems, Karen, like we came through a rather long historical period of time where the world didn't change much. And then all of a sudden we hit a time period where everything is changing. As an executive today and going forward, what is the role, what is the importance of our ability to adapt?
I would take a little bit of offense to what you've said because the world has always been changing. People are now paying attention to the change, okay? People are now understanding that inclusion is a must and diversity is a must. And so the change has always been there. A lot of people didn't give it the credit that it was due. The same with the fact that you have to have a lot of different people in the room and diverse ideas in the room, and your solution is even that much better. And I think now people are beginning to understand that more. So the change was always there. It's the respect for the diversity and the different voices in the room that now people are saying, maybe that's not a second-class citizen. Maybe that person really does have an idea. And so hopefully in the election, that glass ceiling will be completely broken and it won't be a male-dominated society as it had been. There are a lot of ideas from a lot of people that if you had always respected everyone who was in the room, you probably would have had much better solutions much faster. And I think that's the change right now is change is coming very fast. And you need a lot of people with great ideas to get that adaptation in and that change faster. Once you get the collaboration in the room, 5 people are going to see it completely different. And once you talk to the 5, some of the ideas that are going to come forward, and you have to be a risk taker. You got to be able to go out there and say, let's try it that way. And if it doesn't work, well, it didn't work. But you didn't lose anything by trying that.
And it doesn't mean we can't adjust.
And you got to adjust and you got to, okay, so what do we need to do different? What do we need to do better? And again, those 5 people will see different ways of handling it. And you got to respect the ideas in the room. So collaboration, brainstorming, all that stuff was always there. But now people are respecting the ideas that came out, and change in our world, in our generation, is going to happen so much faster that you better be an adapter. You better be able to bring in disparate ideas and go ahead and try something, be a risk taker, because you're going to miss out if you don't.
Julie, you had mentioned in the intro how important collaborative listening was in Karen's message, and I listened to that and I heard that again for the second time. Can you talk about how important or what collaborative learning really is?
So she described collaborative listening as really the importance of listening to your customers, your members, your clients, your community, whatever group it is you're trying to serve, and understanding their needs, and then also playing those back to them to see if you've captured them correctly. And in that way, she used that interaction to build a collective vision so that everybody felt they were going in the same direction, and that she, as a person with a skill set, was using her skill set to forward that vision.
Well, and if you do that, if you create that, if you have the capacity to do collaborative listening and then feedback, is this what I'm hearing you say is important, how does that move the narrative then, Julie, from I can't do something to I can do something?
Well, I think she described it as her role as a connector. She is a disruptor, she acknowledged, but she's also a connector. And she was able to bring together a lot of people and accomplish more that way by listening to their needs, meeting their needs. But that required her not to just have her vision, but to get a vision that was constructed from many different perspectives. And that's where the real power of what they accomplished and what she accomplished in her life has come from, that was not just about her, it was about, sort of the whole group of people that could get something done and get more done.
Are you saying then that she was actually able to convert collaborative listening to a collaborative energy to accomplish?
Yes, and she specifically talked about leaders needing to understand the word we, because if they didn't, they would not be leaders for long. But if they did, they could actually accomplish more than they could alone. But that was part of her understanding other people's story and being able to pull that together into a big project.
One of the things that I've heard people say, whether it's true or not, is that people with a strong technical skill set don't always make great leaders. Yet what I've heard from Karen with her very strong technical capacity is completely rewriting that myth.
Yeah. I think that comes from her own personal sense of mission about what she wanted to accomplish. She didn't want to be just an architect. She wanted to be a person that helped create a home for someone. And so she needed to understand who she was working with and for. And she used her skills to then leverage this whole team of professionals that helped build a home in the early parts of her career to do more than just build a house, but to build a home. And so it's shared vision, and it's leveraging a big team with a lot of different skill sets. And she's applied that in other areas of her life. And that sense of mission clearly drives what she does as being far more than a person with a technical skill. It's what is inspiring about her.
One of the challenges for me when you move into a more collaborative space where everything becomes important is trying to understand then how to prioritize what things have to go first. So how, Julie, in a more collaborative listening, collaborative energy process, does a leader also have to learn how to prioritize, how to channel that energy into very specific things?
So we can use her analogy of building a house or building a home for someone as a good example of that. You can't do everything. There is limited time, there is limited resource, there's limited energy. So she talked about working through the list of what's most important in a given situation to the people that she was doing the work with, so that she could figure out not only timing, but what could actually be accomplished. And I think as a leader, you have to embrace the idea that you can't do everything, and you certainly can't do everything right now. You have to figure out what are the most important things, where's the most important starting place. It's, putting the big rocks in, and then the littler rocks, and then the sand, and then the water. That's the approach she used with building her projects, to identify the most important things to make sure that those were accomplished and that those goals were met.
So really her technical skill became her strength because she had a very strong sense of what she needed to accomplish. She was able to start with the end in mind.
Right.
And then from there, drive the listening and the conversation and the energy to a very productive place.
Right. She actually made that conversation happen. And I'm sure in many cases, in the projects that she worked on, big or small, the people that she was doing it for didn't even really know they needed to have that kind of definition to be able to get what they want accomplished. And she helped them get there. She used her skills to help them get that bigger vision for what they wanted it to be.
It is an absolutely phenomenal story. So remember, if you're ready for a change, make it a change that lasts. Make it pure reinvention.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new podcasts are up by following us on Twitter at Pure Reinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.